What's up everybody, I'm Adam, you're watching the Model Aviator channel. In this week's Quick Look Fun Flight episode, we're checking out another one we got from Anthony and Jackie at FPV Builds RC, another KAVAN. This one's been out a while. This one is the Bristell B23. The full-scale airplane is a two-seater, has 160 horsepower, turbocharged Rotax engine. It is fast, it is comfortable, it's IFR rated. It's a nice ride. Model ain't bad either. The B23 is obviously a good size model, 1600mm wingspan or 63 inches, so it's not a park flyer. It'll be right at home at a sanctioned flying area or club, but it can fly very slow very well, so a confident enough pilot could certainly fly this airplane in a much smaller area. So if you want to fly it at parks or schoolyards, you just need to be aware of the laws governing model flying in your area and make sure you're following those. But the airplane will absolutely do it if you want to. Now, KAVAN on their website in the Czech Republic, they list this as an ARF. It is actually a plug and play, and that is reflected on the FPV Builds RC website. That is the sole importer of KAVAN here in the States. That means that all the electronics are pre-installed for you. You have motor, ESC, and servos. You only need to install your receiver of choice. Any protocol is fine, as long as it's a full range receiver. It comes out of the box as a 5-channel airplane. You have elevator, rudder with a steerable nose wheel, ailerons, and flaps, and of course throttle control. If you're going to use some sort of stabilizer, if it isn't self-contained in the receiver like a Spectrum, you may need a 6-channel to handle that. The B23 has a lot of nice scale detail. The mold is pretty decent with panel lines in the right places. You have a scale 3-bladed prop. The nose gear is scale, and that's a very complicated geometry to get right on a model. If it's set up properly, works very well on the KAVAN. You have antennas in all the right places, a pitot tube underneath the left wing. You have LED navigation and flashing strobe lights on the wingtips, as well as LED landing lights. And the flaps are properly hinged so that they extend like the full-scale Bristell B23. Those are actually slotted Fowler flaps, so they come out and down. They're very effective. It does have a convenient top-loading hatch, and the hatch, by the way, is very detailed. You have some very detailed seats and a detailed instrument panel, a couple sticks in there. It just needs a pilot, I think. But there is plenty of room in that battery bay for even the largest recommended packs. The recommended packs are 2600 to 3300 4 cells. The assembly of the B23 is not difficult per se, but it is more complicated than some. There is some gluing required. You have to glue on both your vertical and your horizontal. Now these KAVAN manuals catch some people off guard. They're written a little bit different. It's a multi-language manual, but they only printed one set of illustrations for all languages to reference. So the illustrations are on page 9 and 10. If you speak English, for instance, your written instructions are on page 3. No hill for a climber. Now there were a few things that we ran into. When we were gluing our empennage on, when it came to the vertical was pretty loose. Now there's a lot of surface area to glue on both sides and on the bottom, so what we did is used thin Scotch clear tape on both sides to shim that, and then just used a liberal amount of foam tack on the lower sides and on the bottom to secure that vertical in place. It holds fine, and now it's nice and tight. The other thing we ran into is when it comes to that nose gear, we mentioned earlier setting that up right. The nose gear leg goes into an aluminum servo arm, and you tighten a screw down on a flat spot on that gear leg. Well, I couldn't get my screw to tighten down enough for that gear leg not to move inside that servo arm, and what was happening is it wasn't fully engaging the flat spot. So I had to take a Dremel and Dremel off that flat spot all the way to the top, so that my screw had some flat area to engage. Once I did that, use some Loctite, tighten the screw really good. It is nice and secure. It taxis, takes off, and lands just fine now on grass or pavement. So you may have to do that to yours. The other thing that I just found a little bit odd, when it comes to putting the wings and the gear on with this airplane, it shows an illustration for machine screws. Well, I tried that and I couldn't get them to take. So I took it off to see what was going on, and that's when I figured out why there was another set of long self-tapping screws. It's just a plastic tower. There are no blind nuts there, so you actually use self-tapping wing screws to attach the wing to the fuse and the gear to the wing, which is fine if you can store it and transport it together the way we can. But a lot of people, given the size of this, are going to want to have to take that wing off for transportation and storage, and if you do that a lot, you're going to wear out that plastic tower taking a self-tapping screw in and out of it. There is a workaround though. When you wear that out, you can fill that channel with 30-minute epoxy, excuse my voice, and let that cure. Then you drill that out, and then you screw your self-tapping screw in there and make new threads. That will hold for quite a while, longer than the plastic will by a good bit, but eventually you may have to do that again. Another workaround, if you want to really do some modeling, you can just get rid of those plastic towers, replace that with a thin piece of ply, and put blind nuts in the ply, glue that to the wing, and then that may hold, or glue that to the fuse, and that may hold much better. For what it's worth, Anthony from FPV Builds RC has let KAVAN know about that, and they know that's not right. And also, for what it's worth, the newer models, the Porter and the Norden, are not like that. So hopefully this is a one-off, and all KAVAN airplanes in the future will be more like the Norden. When it comes to setup, the manual has the usual bits of pertinent information you're used to, things like rates, expos, CG suggestions. We fly Spectrum, so we installed an AR631 Plus receiver. We are utilizing AS3X Plus. We did tune it to the B23, and we have that on a switch, so we can report to you how it flies both with and without it. If you fly Spectrum and you'd like to duplicate our AS3X Plus settings for this airplane, here they are. You can pause that and do just that. As far as the rest of our setup is concerned, our CG is 87 millimeters from the leading edge of the wing, where the wing meets the fuselage, with the plane upside down. To get that CG, we had to utilize a 3200 4-cell pack, pushed as far forward as we can get it in the battery bay without it interfering with the nose wheel steering. Our mechanical adjustments are as follows: aileron, elevator, and rudder. We are in the outermost hole of both the servo arm and the control horn on all three. The flaps can be centered and adjusted via quick connects. Here are our flap settings and our transmitter if you'd like to duplicate those on your plane. We are at 100% rates, 10% expo on aileron, 100% rates, 10% expo on elevator, and 100% rates, 40% expo on the rudder. When it comes to the flight characteristics, we'll get into more detail during the fun flight demo, but we will touch on a few things here. When it comes to our CG and the use of the larger pack, those of you that know me know I'm a big advocate of lighter packs. Lighter airplanes fly better, and that's true. The exception is if you can't get the airplane to properly balance on the lighter pack, and that was the case with this. I flew it with the 2200 4-cell right in the center, flew tail heavy, moved it all the way forward, still flew tail heavy. Not, oh my goodness, I'm going to crash it tail heavy. It just didn't feel right during certain maneuvers. So we went to the 3200, we ended up taking it all the way forward. Once we got it all the way forward, that is the ticket. The heavier pack actually works better on this airplane. You get the proper balance point. It's a big wing. The flaps are very effective. It's not a stall plane, so it doesn't have to slow down to almost a stop, but it still slows down really, really well for what it is, and you get a lot of duration with that larger pack. You can dog it for 8 minutes or shoot and touch and goes for 12, your choice, but it is very, very efficient. The other thing we want to touch on is this. Now, KAVAN says to take this out in the manual. I didn't see that part. This is covering up the electronics board when you get the airplane, and it will cover up the electronics board and your receiver if you do what I did and you put it back. Makes it look really neat. It's really cool. Problem is, it blocks the airflow and won't let it exit. So this will happen. Your hatch will pop up if you really give it the beans, and I was really lucky that it didn't come off and I didn't lose it or really damage it. It didn't fall off till after we landed safely. So they say don't put this in there. They're not joking. Don't. Now when it comes to skill level, this is not a trainer. The assembly, the setup, the flying, there are much better trainers out there. I would say if you have mastered a trainer, this would make an excellent second airplane, and give somebody that only has experience with like an apprentice or an Aero Scout an airplane that is a little bit more complicated to get together and set up than their trainer. And it's always good to grow and develop in the hobby, but once they get it done, it's not much harder to fly than a trainer. Obviously an experienced pilot will have a blast with this. I know that I did. Now when it comes to price point, $432 is the going price at FPV Builds RC here in the US. It's difficult to get these things imported from the Czech Republic. They demand a premium price for these airplanes. I think they are premium airplanes, although I have to admit this one is not as convenient as the others that I've tested, but it is an older model, so that kind of makes sense. The only real point of contention for me is the self-tapping screws into plastic to hold the wing on. I think for people that have to remove the wing a lot for storage and transport, that has a potential to be a problem. I will say this, there is a workaround. You can fix that if you're willing to do some modeling and make it a non-issue for you. And I'll also say that I've seen a lot of reviews on this airplane, and while people mention the self-tapping screws, they don't mention it being an issue to take the wing on and off, and everybody that's got one of these things loves it. So it may not be as big a deal as I think it has a potential to be, but I think for some it could be a big deal. If you would like to add one of these to your hangar, I will say that it is big, it is easy to see, it has a lot of preference, it flies beautifully, and it is different. It's a really different looking airplane and a nice addition to the somewhat scale GA category for foam airplanes. We had a great time flying it. We think it's well worth the price point for the flyability and the looks if you're a good enough modeler to deal with the one little issue. So we'll put some links in the description where you can add one to your hangar if you'd like to. When you do that, it lets Anthony and Jackie at FPV Builds RC know that you like what we're doing. When you do that, we appreciate it. Thanks very much. That is it for us. The Fun Flight demo is next. Enjoy that. We'll see you next week with something cool with wings. This is a good size model. It's a very stable design. It flies well without a gyro, but obviously with well-tuned AS3X Plus, it does refine the experience, and it certainly makes it easier to handle in wind. Here we're going to do a quick stall test. This is a 1G stall clean with no flaps, and it drops the nose straight forward. Little hint of dropping the right wing, but it doesn't completely drop it. And now we're going to go to full flaps and try the same thing. Gets very slow. We get it almost to a stop, and then it will finally drop that right wing. Very easy recovery. Unload the airframe, give it a little throttle, fly right out of it. That was a full speed pass and vertical climb. There's enough power for any kind of sport or scale aerobatics you might want to do. With full flaps, she slows down nicely and is very stable. Like most other sport or scale civilian aviation models, this one flies inverted very well. It's stable, doesn't require a lot of down elevator to maintain it, and there's plenty to push through negative maneuvers if you want. It'll do a pretty decent snap roll as well. You could almost call that a pop top. It was close. One of the things I love to do with any tricycle gear general aviation airplane is touch and goes. They're so much fun. And I even got a one-wheeler out of this one. We just experimented with a flat turn. Now we're going to do a little slip to landing. Very stable in cross control. You just got to make sure you have enough speed or angle of attack to get away with it. The B23 sounds like the other KAVAN airplanes we've flown. It has that little sound with the ESC that sounds like the timing is off, but it never affects performance. This one's very stable, it's precise, it's a lot of fun to fly, and it's a looker. Really a good looking, different general aviation model. We're doing some grass ops for you. The B23 is a decent sized model. Even with the wheel pants, it does well off the grass. You shouldn't have any trouble unless your grass is just really tall. We had a great time flying the B23. It has a few little modeling issues that need to be addressed, but they are certainly worth doing. Beautiful model, a lot of fun. We think those of you that want to add one to your hangar will have as much fun as we did. That's it for us. Take care of yourselves. Happy flying. We'll see you next week.